This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and today we are doing something very exciting, special. I don't know what to say. I'm trying to hold back my enthusiasm or my excitement just a little bit. We are checking out one of the true unicorns in the sim racing industry. So what do we have here? This is the Pro-Sim Quaife Sequential Shifter. And if you've never seen this sequential shifter before, I totally understand. Again, it's a unicorn. They are very rare. They're very unique and they are very, very special. So let's break it down. Pro-Sim. Pro-Sim is a company that has been making professional simulator grade products for many years. If you were looking for a Leo Bodnar wheel, you're going to get it through Pro-Sim. They are one of the original companies to make independent steering wheels for sim racing. And then they've partnered with Quaife to make the sequential shifter and an H pattern that they also have available. Now, if you know racing, if you're in the racing industry, Quaife engineering goes back since 1965, making race car gearboxes and parts, and they're very, very known in the racing industry, and they do some OEM work as well. And that company has utilized all the technology and everything they know about making gearboxes and made a H pattern and a sequential shifter and produced them with Pro-Sim to be sim racing equipment. And that makes it very, very special. And just looking at it, you can tell it's different and it is outstanding. So what do we have here? This is like all metal. Everything on the outside for the most part is like beautifully, beautifully cut and anodized aluminum. It is gorgeous. It's got some shape. It's got bulk. Despite aluminum on the outside, it's almost all metal on the inside, but we're talking about extremely hardened steel, and then it has a detent spring mechanism for the shift operation that we'll talk about more. The Pro-Sim Quaife Sequential Shifter is completely designed and made in the UK, and this is going to set you back. Get ready for it. The price is a little bit steep. You're looking at 865 British pounds, which ends up being about $1,100 here in the United States. So at that price point, you are looking at double the price of some expensive sequential shifters and probably triple the price of some normal sequential shifters, and maybe as much as 10 times the price on some inexpensive off Amazon type shifters. But there is a huge difference, and you're gonna hear it, you're gonna see it, and you're definitely gonna feel it when you use this shifter. So we started talking about some of the things. It is all metal construction. We've seen this detent style mechanism, so it's gonna take a lot of pressure because I have this thing really cranked up. But when I move that handle, you'll see inside a pivoting, rotating unit. That unit has little detents in it, and a heavy-duty spring-loaded ball bearing will drop into those detents. Each time you shift, it needs to press against that steel ball hard enough to press it against the spring to release the handle. And this means absolutely no misshift whatsoever. I've never had a misshift with this shifter at all in all my testing. And on top of that, it is the most noticeable audio and tactile click that I've ever felt. So when Pro-Sim and Quaife Engineering started working together, that was the entire point of this shifter, was to give sim racers a shifter that actually felt like a real mechanism, not just like you're pressing some buttons at the end of a spring. So it is really cool. It's really a beautiful shifter, and it is adjustable in, I guess, the only way we'd want to be able to adjust a shifter, and that being this mechanism, this threaded bolt here, actually presses down on that spring to create the load on the ball bearing. When I turn this bolt out, it relieves the pressure on the spring, taking less energy to activate the shifter. So it is pretty basic and easy, but you're going to need tools because it is all very heavy duty. Now, before we get this on the rig and get it out on track and see how it actually performs, let's talk about a few options we have. So it comes with the standard shift knob, which is elongated and aluminum. They also have the more rounded one, which goes on the H pattern shifter available for the Quaife Sequential Shifter. So this is an add-on, and with that actual post, it's going to increase its height a little bit. And if you're ordering it with the base, it's not very much, so it's not really going to make a big difference. It's just a matter of preference. Now, the other one I'm very excited about, the other option for this, and over the years I've actually been a little negative about shifters in sim racing, and that being because they don't lock us out of gear when we miss shift, and that's kind of a flaw. So Pro-Sim has come to the rescue with their hydraulic shift lock, which works with both the sequential shifter and their H pattern. This thing's very pricey, 455 British pounds, which ends up being $571, but this mechanism will actually lock you out of a gear when you miss shift, and that would be a game changer. Now, we don't have one here today to test with. It's something I'm dying to test later, and I know it's the kind of thing, much like the haptics on our pedals, we're still waiting on some of the proper support from the software companies to really make these things work great. But now that we have one on the horizon, one that we can actually use, we might be able to expect those upgrades from those companies fairly soon. So when it comes to getting this on the rig, it is very heavy. So the first thing to take into consideration is, what are you mounting this to? What kind of a shifter arm are you putting it on? Because the bulk is bigger and heavier than any shifter you've ever used. The other is the mounting bottom. So you've got this really handy plate where you've got these 4 different slots. It's going to be very easy to either drill holes if you need and just bolt this to any surface as long as it's strong enough. Now, the weight is only part of what we're dealing with. You're going to put this on an arm on your rig, and you're going to put this kind of leverage to do a shift. That's going to have to be a well-supported arm. So in my case, I was able to bolt a piece of profile to my Forever rig. I was able to use a couple of L brackets that ran the length of the shifter to mount the shifter to, and that held it just fine. And then I had to do a support bracket and even a cross brace to make it feel strong enough. And in the end, I'll probably even add another brace because I'm not 100% sure this is going to be strong enough long term. But it was definitely good enough to test with. So now let's talk about how it performs on track. So let's talk about driving with the Pro-Sim Sequential Shifter. This thing is a beast. I mean, is there a different word that I can even use to describe this? I actually have the pressure turned down. So we're not even talking about, it was double the pressure, double the noise when I originally tested it. And I turned it down mostly just for this review so we could hear over it while I'm shifting. It is loud, it is robust, it is rigid, it is strong, it is a beast. I just don't have a better word to describe this shifter. And as many shifters are in this similar style or copycats of this, there are none that compare to that when it comes to the overall strength and power of this shifter. Now, I mean, a shifter, it's really simple, right? A sequential, we're just going up and down, just a click up and a click down. That's all it does. And there are a lot of great options out there. And they would qualify as sim shifters, and they're gonna be built for the rigors of sim racing. But here, we're talking about a real race car shifter. And I mean it literally. This is a real Quaife race car shifter built to the exact same specs, which means if you're trying to reproduce or replicate real car conditions, I don't think that any of the copycat shifters are going to do it to this degree, and they certainly don't bring that same name recognition with them. Which means that I can think of 2 different types of people who are going to really think of this as being the only shifter option for them, and that being people who are going for the absolute most realistic driving experience you can get. Quaife also makes, or I should say Pro-Sim also makes a Quaife H pattern shifter, which goes for almost double the money, and it brings the same realism into the H pattern world. But in this case, with this sequential, you just can't get more realistic. This is the real deal, made for sim racing. And I think the other people who would really be interested in this shifter are just those who are going for the best components that you can possibly put on a sim rig. And I know there are almost a competition when you look at Reddit and see people posting pictures saying, evaluate my rig. You know, there is a competition amongst us hobbyists who can build or who has the nicest equipment or the nicest rig. And hands down, it's non-competition. When you match the quality of the feel, you match the visual aspects, and you add to that the name of Quaife and real racing, not just car parts, real racing car parts to it, it just doesn't compare. It would be the Bugatti of the sequential shifter world, and I don't see how they'd even be knocked off of that top rung. It would be impossible to do. You could only maybe match it if you were lucky, and many have copied it, and mimicked it, and they've done fine jobs. So there are less expensive options in this same detent style shifter. However, they're just not in the same league. Now, as I mentioned, I have it down to about half pressure right now. So it's a lot lighter on the pressure to click, and it's a little bit less noise, but still quite noisy. You know, I talk about button clicks, I talk about paddle shifter clicks, and getting that positive feedback, not only audible, but also tactile feedback out of the device to confirm that things have actually happened when you asked for them. In the case of this shifter, obviously I am feeling it, you're hearing it, and when I was running in headphones, I was not only feeling it, but I was also hearing it over my headphones. So it is actually quite loud, but with that you get absolute confirmation that a shift has occurred. The shifts are smooth, so as much pressure as it takes, all I'm fighting is that ball bearing detent of the mechanism that you see inside. It's not as though I'm fighting any kind of a friction. It is the spring pressure on that ball and how hard that ball is being pressed into each of those independent little holes that it drops into. It is totally smooth. And here's the other thing, man, you can hit this as hard as you want. So when I called it a beast, it's not just the energy that it takes me to move it and the way it performs an axe, but it's that you could be just ridiculously rough on your equipment and it doesn't care. It's gonna beg for more. And when you're doing that kind of action, that over the top, too much, too fast, too big pressure on the thing, it just kind of laughs when you do it. So I gotta tell you, this shifter has performed in every way I could possibly ask it to. It is rare that while doing a review that I would say, hey, this is the kind of equipment that I'm gonna put on my forever rig. And I don't know if you noticed, but this is already on my forever rig and it is gonna stay because I just can't think of a better shifter that I would put on my rig, and a sequential is the way that I would go for sure. Now the last thing I wanna say about sequential shifters, and this is just something for me, I think sometimes they help with your tempo of driving. I have a tendency to downshift a little too quickly going into corners under braking when I'm using paddle shifters. And I just find that because I have to reach off, it delays that first downshift. And even when I'm in that whole mode with the shifter, I just find that I get in a really nice rhythm with the car, and it helps me drive cars better. Because when you downshift too fast, like I do have a tendency to do, you'll actually find that you're constantly skipping the rear end of the car and even sometimes spinning out of control as a result of improper shifting timing. I don't have anything that I could say in a negative aspect. The only thing I could possibly say is that noise is loud, and maybe your roommate, if you have a roommate or family or other people you live it with, they might actually ask you, hey, can you shut the door or can you turn that thing down? Because that is really loud and really constant with you racing for a couple of hours. So let's get that other shift knob on and we'll bring this driving portion of the review to an end. All right, as you see, things have changed. We now have the GT knob. This is the same knob that goes on the H pattern variation of this shifter, and it comes with an extension by default. So honestly, I'd probably lower the shifter if I was going to use this particular extension and knob. But I understand why some people would like it. It has more of that conventional round shape to it. Now, I don't mind the thin knob, and the price difference isn't very extreme. So it's really more of a preference than a decision based on what it actually costs. But it does increase the leverage because of the extension. It is now even more leverage on that handle but it's still such a robust shifter that's not a problem. I think with some lightweight shifters, if you put an extension on it, you might not even feel the detents when you engaged a gear. With this, you definitely do. I also cranked up the tension a little bit because earlier I had it at more of a medium type setting, still taking quite a bit of pressure and making a good amount of noise, but you can hear it is a little bit more robust with that sound, and it is taking quite a bit more energy to engage each click, even with the added leverage of the longer handle. So ultimately, it doesn't change the shifter a whole lot other than the dimensions and the feel of the knob itself, but it does just kind of remind me, as I'm sitting here clicking through the gears driving this, it really feels like I'm engaging a real shifter, a real gearbox. Like, you feel like there's mechanical parts moving. It's not just a resistance point and a spring, or a resistance point and a little click of a button on the inside. This feels like you're engaging the gear of the transmission. It even feels like there's some linkage involved. And the comparison between this and a real life sequential is just astounding, because again, it just is. So on the driving aspects, there's just absolutely nothing negative that I can say about this shifter. On the driving aspects, it is perfection in sim racing. It is elegant, it's robust, it's awesome. It's going to impress your friends. It's going to impress your family. And you're definitely going to have the nicest shifter on the block, that's for sure. Oh, what a pleasure it was to drive with this shifter. I mean, I hate glowing so much during a review because it just feels a little biased, but it's, again, kind of hard to hold things back, because when things are this impressive, outside of breaking the bank or killing my wallet, it definitely gives me a big smile on my face. But just to make sure, in case you missed the most important factors, let's go ahead and break it down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, and that being, it is the best shifter on the market. Great feeling shifts. The most realistic sequential shifter. Extremely high quality construction. Made in the UK. Looks awesome. Adjustable tension. Indestructible. Great confirmation feedback. Potential for gear lockout. And now on to the not so good, and the elephant in the room obviously is, it is extremely expensive. Requires a strong chassis, and it's noisy. And now on to the bottom line. This is the best sequential shifter that a sim racer can get. End of story. I mean, I just don't know what to tell you beyond that. It is just true. It is fact. However, am I telling you to take $1,100 and go out and buy one tomorrow? No, I definitely am not. I mean, this is fantastic. It is on the level of being the Bugatti in the car world. It is probably unobtainable by most of us, and that's okay, because there are a lot of great shifters out there that can duplicate a lot of this effect. There are a lot of great shifters that you can get inexpensive that don't have this great effect but get the job done just fine, and I'm definitely telling you that that's probably a better option for you. Now, on the other hand, if you're one of those people who is spending 30 hours a week in your sim rig, if this is your biggest hobby and you have the discretionary income and you've been just piece by piece building the most perfect sim, well, if you're going to put a sequential shifter on that sim, this is the sequential shifter to go with. Absolutely. Now, if you're a pro racer, you probably have a little bit extra money just because racing is so expensive, and you're building a simulator in your home and you happen to drive a sequential car in real life and you just want your sim to feel just like your real car, this is the only sim shifter that's probably going to do exactly what you want it to do and feel the way you want it to feel. So it has absolute application. It has absolute real world use that is going to be very practical and worth that money. And for a lot of us sim racers, just like a Bugatti, it's something that we can dream about in the future. So I love this shifter. It is going on my forever rig. You are going to have to pry it out of my hands if you think you're going to get this from me. No way. It is on my rig forever. I love this thing. I probably wouldn't go to an H pattern on my personal rig just for my personal preferences, but I would use a sequential because I somehow sometimes feel I have better timing with my shifts. So this is definitely going to stay there. And that lockout mechanism, if I can ever get my hands on that hydraulic shift lockout mechanism, again, it is going to transform sim racing. It is going to change my opinion on the utility of a sequential shifter, or even an H pattern for that matter shifter in sim racing. It is going to put the shifter at the level of our force feedback wheels that we're talking about today, or even like the active pedal from SimuCube, and just being at that next level. When we talk about where is tomorrow in sim racing, it's going to be things like that. So I think Pro-Sim is well on their way. Great job working with Quaife Engineering on this and developing what is absolutely my favorite sequential shifter. So I know it was biased. It is. I love it too much, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot about this shifter. If you did enjoy it, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you can find out when our next video comes out, and thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.